Before anything else, I would like to introduce you guys to Carmela. So Carmela is my personal accountant for years already. I'm so happy that I found her because I think of all the accountants that I tried to communicate with and I tried to talk to, she is the one who's really like I'm so comfortable with. So today we're very lucky that she said yes once again to allow us to ask her as much question as we can, right? Usually with if you ask for, a time from an accountant, usually they will charge you per hour. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Carmela, for being
Oh,
here
you're
today and
welcome. Yeah.
for allowing us to ask you questions because a lot of my students and a lot of those people I invited actually for sure needs help in terms of filing the taxes for 2023. And,
Mhm.
I don't need to say a lot of things anymore about you. I'm gonna give you the floor to discuss everything.
Great. Well, this is a perfect time to have a discussion, especially because, tax season started on Monday, and I'm sure everybody's kind of wondering how to get their paperwork ready, either for their accountant or for themselves if they're filing for the first time as an Amazon seller. It can get kind of confusing just because Amazon's seller account, I mean, everybody knows how many reports there are. There must be hundreds of reports there. So you don't know exactly which one you're going to need in order to, properly file your tax return. So I just created some slides. I can share these with you, Cheryl, later so that people can
Mhm.
have them as a reference instead of, I find that if people are taking notes, sometimes they're not, they're not catching everything that we say.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'll share the slides with everybody if they like.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Um,
Before anything
mm,
else, before you continue, I just want to remind everybody that you can actually ask question to Carmela. So if you guys have questions, so she's gonna do some presentations. So if you have questions, type it in the chat box, and I will relay it later after the presentation. Okay?
as I mentioned, this is just a little bit of a rundown as to how you can prepare for tax season as a new seller. Or, this might be your second year filing, but, perhaps you're going to learn a few new things, hopefully. So, the first thing, I always get asked, what kind of documents do you need? So, and keep in mind, the title says list of documents to provide to your accountant. So it doesn't have to be for your accountant. Perhaps you're going to try and file your own taxes this year. So these are the documents that you would need in order to gather all the information to report on your tax return. So as a sole proprietor who does not have an HST registration, you'll have to download the Amazon annual sales summary. Here you find your gross income. You also find all the Amazon expenses that were charged to you during the year. The expenses are very, very important because that will lower your taxable income and it'll lower your tax overall. The Amazon seller fee invoices, these you may want to just download them. If you're not registered for HST, then you don't really need these for your tax return, but it's good to have a file with all of these in there because after a certain period of time, Amazon doesn't allow you to go back and download them, right? So you're going to need proof in the event of an audit. So I suggest downloading all your reports on a monthly basis. That way you've got them. You don't have to worry that you're missing anything should you be audited. The very, very important part of your tax return is inventory. So if you've spent in the year, let's say you spent $10,000 on product that you sent to Amazon, but you only sold $5,000 worth of product, At the end of the year, you've got $5,000 sitting there still. So you can't expense that $5,000 because it's not sold yet. So you need to factor this into your schedule on your tax return. Because if you do expense the full 10,000, that's actually reducing your taxable income, which isn't accurate. So this is something that a lot of people forget, but you really have to have it in there. And there is a spot, the schedule that you'll want to look at. So if you are preparing your own tax return, the statement is called Statement of Business Activity. The form number is T2125. You might be able to Google that. I'm sure you can get a PDF version of it. And you will see there is a spot for your beginning inventory. So if you're a new seller, the beginning inventory is 0. And then there's a spot for your ending inventory. So that's really important. The other thing that, you know, as a small business, you can expense a portion of your home expenses if you use that for business purposes. What you'll have to provide, either, you know, you've got to calculate it for yourself, but you also have to provide it to your accountant, what percentage of your home you actually use. Very basic calculation is taking the square footage of your space for business and you know, divide by the total square footage. So that could give you your percentage. So some of the home expenses that you can deduct are mortgage interest. So it's the interest portion only, or rent. You've got internet. So unfortunately, you know, CRA won't let you expense 100% of your internet because there is a personal use portion, right? So like if you're watching TV, if you've got Netflix or Prime or anything like that, you're using the internet for personal use, right? So I usually take the home percentage and apply it to the internet as well. I apply it to the cell phone as well. There is property insurance, property tax, utilities. That's important. So things like that you can certainly expense, and that will help you, you know, reduce your taxable income. And in similar way, your vehicle. So if, you know, people are doing retail arbitrage or online arbitrage, sometimes they may have to go and pick up the product, or they have to, you know, drop off the boxes, or go buy, you know, shipping supplies. So things like that, whenever you use your vehicle and it is for business, you can write off a portion of the expenses. So the expenses for vehicle would be your gas, your insurance, repairs and maintenance. If you do use things like the 407, you can't apply the percentage to the 407 because on the 407 bill, it actually shows the detail of your trips. So if you have 5 trips and only 1 is actually for business, then that's the portion that you would use, right? So you kind of have to be careful for these things like parking as well. You can't just put all your parking tickets and take the percentage, because if these parking, I shouldn't say tickets, sorry, tickets are not deductible. So if you get a parking ticket, that's not deductible, but parking fees, I should say. So your parking fees, if you've parked, you know, at, you know, the hospital, you parked at, I don't know, the library, things that have nothing to do with business, you can't expense that, right? So you would only pick up the parking fees, you know, if you had to park somewhere for business specifically. So the percentage doesn't apply to your parking as well. Then there's the big, these are relatively easy. You know, the sales summary, the seller fee invoices, those are just downloads from your seller account. The inventory is a little tricky. Amazon used to provide a really beautiful report at the end of the year. Now they don't anymore. So you can only go back 30 days. So if right now you had to provide this to your accountant or for yourself, you could only go back to January 23rd. And we would need, December 31st figures. For now, that's all you have. So that's all you can kind of work with, unless, you're using something like Seller Board. That will give you a nice report at the end of the year. And I think it's relatively, inexpensive compared to what other apps are costing these days. But Cheryl could probably confirm that. I'm not sure what the price is these days. So now we get to the expenses. So this part sometimes creates a little bit of confusion just because people don't know what exactly they can expense. To someone like myself, I can, ramble off the expenses, but for yourself, if you're wondering, can I expense it? Can I not expense it? The rule of thumb for me, I always tell people, is keep all your receipts, whether you think you can expense it or you think you can't expense it. So keep all your receipts, because without your receipts, you can't claim it, right? So keep all your receipts. If you have questions or you're unsure, you can Google, of course. You can ask around. I would take all of that with a grain of salt, unless it comes from the CRA website. I wouldn't, believe anything online. Unfortunately, there's just way too much stuff out there that's inaccurate. So you could ask an accountant as well. So I think what you should be doing with the expenses is have an Excel spreadsheet where each tab is a category. So, the title of the Excel sheet would say, expenses 2023. And then your tabs would be things like office supplies, subscriptions. So your Keepa, your Seller Board, Inventory Lab, things like that you use. You've got, if you do any advertising outside of Amazon, right? So if you're promoting your product on Instagram and you're paying for ads or on Facebook, then that's where you would put your advertising. So meals and entertainment. I get a lot of questions about this. I did go through an audit with an Amazon seller, and he had very little meals, right? So it wasn't like they disallowed the meals because it was just such a large amount. I think his meals might have been $200, which is like nothing. But the auditor flat out asked me, who does he take to lunch if he, sells online? Like, he can't be taking his customers, right? What I would kind of beg to differ there is if you're a wholesaler and you're trying to connect with these wholesalers to get an account, maybe, depending if they are local, you perhaps meet over lunch. So something like that, but it has to be very specific, and you have to, kind of, what I suggest is on the receipt, you would put, lunch with so-and-so, whatever wholesale company you're dealing with. So in general, though, meals and entertainment are not deductible. Some of the other expenses, we've got some travel, right? So perhaps, let's say you are going, you want to sell in the States, and there's some wholesalers there that you want to meet with, or maybe you've got, you're talking with someone about becoming partners in this Amazon business, and you travel to the States. Then, if it is strictly for business, we can deduct that. If, you're going to the States, if you're going to Florida, trying to see whether or not you can set up a business there, but you take your family, then there's a portion of personal use. So we have to take that into account. So, those are some of the main expenses. If you have questions about certain expenses that you're thinking about, you can, ask in the chat, and then we can go over them afterwards. So what's the difference if you're a sole proprietorship and now you're registered for HST? Well, in your case, all the documents are exactly the same, except for the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet has to separate the HST so that it's clear when you're preparing your HST return what amount you're going to claim back, okay? Because you want your money back. And so it's important to note that if you are a sole prop with an HST number, GST number, you cannot expense the GST portion and then claim it back. So if you have an expense for $113, and I'm talking about people here in Ontario, so $113, the $13 is what you claim back on your HST return, but the $100 is what you claim as a business expense. So you don't claim $113 as your business expense and then ask the government for $13 of the HST, right? So if that's not clear, let me know and I can, go through it a little bit later. So now what about if you're a corporation? Well, this becomes a little bit more complicated. Sole proprietorships have an option of using bookkeeping software or the Excel spreadsheet, depending on how big they're getting. Like if your sales start going like $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, I strongly recommend bookkeeping software. I personally think bookkeeping software is great right from the beginning, no matter how small or how big you are. And the reason for that is if you are learning how to do your own bookkeeping and you're starting from very minimal transactions, it's easier to kind of get the hang of that and to learn when there's less transactions rather than when your business is booming and you've got, sales coming in quick, you've got expenses, it just becomes less chaotic to learn how to do your bookkeeping. That's my opinion. But if you're a corporation, you must have bookkeeping software. Doesn't matter what kind of bookkeeping software, but it has to be able to provide you with a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement at the end of the year. When you report your business activity as a corporation to CRA, the software actually will ask for your assets and your liabilities, your equity, retained earnings. So there's all that information that if you're using an Excel spreadsheet, it's nearly impossible to, kind of figure this out. I have done it in the past for, companies who've had like 1 or 2 months of activity and there hasn't been too much. But it's very time consuming and it's just going to cost you more in the end. So as a corporation, if you are using an accountant to file your corporate tax return, I'm not sure if we do have some corporate tax software out there. I thought Intuit had something like that. And certainly you can do download the forms, but CRA requires you to file electronically. So you're going to need some sort of software. But in any case, if you are a corporation and you're using an accountant to file your corporate tax return, there's 2 things you can do. So you can either give them a completed set of books. So you would be doing the bookkeeping, or you have a bookkeeper, either local or someone that you know, and they're doing the bookkeeping for you. So you share the software, so you share your books with your accountant. If you're not using a bookkeeper of your own, or you're not doing your own bookkeeping, then these are the things that your accountant will need in order to do the bookkeeping. So in either case, bookkeeping must be done. I find that some people get a little confused. It's like, well, I give all my statements. I've had people say, I just give my statements to the accountant and then he does the tax return. Well, he's not just doing the tax return, he's doing the bookkeeping first, because you can't do a tax return without the bookkeeping. After 25 years of this stuff, you just can't do it. So you have to provide them the bank statements for the entire year for all your corporate bank accounts. They don't need your personal statements. They just need for the corporate accounts. The credit card statements that you use for business, Ideally, if you're using personal credit cards, and that's fine, you can use your personal credit cards for business. Try and use 1 or 2 credit cards that are strictly for business, no personal expenses on there at all. It makes it easier for the bookkeeper. It cuts down your costs, your bookkeeping costs, and it just makes it cleaner during an audit. If you're in a situation where that isn't possible, then when you provide your credit card statements, highlight the business expenses. Because you can imagine if a bookkeeper gets your personal credit card statements, but there's some business and personal transactions on there, how are they going to know exactly? Some things might be very obvious, but let's say you're sourcing from Walmart and you're also grocery shopping at Walmart for your personal use. How is that bookkeeper going to know that, right? So you have to try and keep in mind that although you can send everything to your accountant or your bookkeeper, they don't know what you've been doing 100%, right? They can guess, which is never good. And they should be asking you questions. So whoever you use, an accountant or bookkeeper, they need to ask you questions, because if they're not asking you questions, that's a problem. That's a flag. So the credit card statements. Then we've got Amazon payouts. So, I know we hate how Amazon keeps your money, but at the end of the year, so on December 31st, or your fiscal year end, I'm going to use December 31st, but your year end could be any month. So if your year end is December 31st, there should be a payout statement that covers that period. It'll never fall right on December 31st, just because how the payouts work every couple of weeks with Amazon. But it's something that, either we have like January 3rd, or, like whatever final payment you have that sort of covers that period, and maybe, a few days into the new year. This is important because if Amazon is holding your money, so let's say Amazon is holding $3,000, we need to show that as a receivable, right? Because you're expecting this money in the following payout or payouts. So that's a really important one. We don't need all your payout statements. We just need the one at the end of the year, so we're recording that properly. You've got your Amazon seller fee invoices. This is also important if you've got your HST registration, similar to the sole prop with an HST. Your Amazon sales summary, that's important. Your inventory is still the same. So you can see how, apart from the first, I guess, 3 items, the set of books, the bank statements, and the credit card statements, everything else, all the other reports are similar to a sole prop, right? So I know sometimes people will say, that with a corporation, you can expense a lot more things. That's not true. If you are a business, whether you're a sole prop or a corporation, you're entitled to claim the same type of expenses. You can have payroll. You can have someone on your payroll. You can't pay yourself as a sole prop. That doesn't work, but you can pay other people, right? So you can still have payroll expenses as a sole prop in a corporation. So that's, hopefully that's clear. It's just the first 3 items that are very important, and that ties into the bookkeeping part of your tax return. So just some important reminders that if you were registered in 2023 for GST, HST at any point, so let's say March 23rd, 2023, you decided you've reached the 30,000 threshold, or you just decided you want to register for the HST so that you can claim some of the HST back. You can only claim your ITCs from the date of registration. So you registered March 23, you can't claim back the HST you paid out from January 1st to March 22nd. Okay, so it's just from the date of registration. If you haven't registered yet for the GST, and you think that, I think it's time to register, or, you want to register, on the registration, when you're applying for a GST, HST number, you can go back 30 days. So if you are registering today, you can ask the government to backdate that registration to January 23rd. That way you've got an extra 30 days that you can claim back. So if you want to backdate it longer, like further back, unless you were charging HST, and you really weren't, it was Amazon who's charging it, then that wouldn't really work. So 30 days, backdate the registration. I mentioned about the inventory. Hopefully by now I've mentioned just how important it is to keep track of this. And the last part, and I always say this because there's still people who either haven't heard or don't know. If you do have a GST HST number, and you've let's say, I'm just going to take an example. So let's say you've registered today, you get your 9-digit registration number, immediately put it into your tax settings of your seller account, because this then will indicate to Amazon to stop collecting and remitting the tax on your behalf. They'll just charge the GST HST to your customer and then give it to you in your payouts to remit it to the government. So that's really important. The second part of that is to update your listings with the proper product tax codes. So if you don't have the product tax codes, then Amazon doesn't know whether they charge the 5%, if you're selling books, or, it just doesn't know what to charge for that listing for you. So in the actual listing, there'll be a box that says product tax code. And in there, if you are selling taxable items, you should enter A_gen_tax. If you're selling non-taxable items, it should be A_gen_no tax. And, sometimes you don't know, is it taxable? Is it not taxable? And going online isn't going to give you the exact answer, unfortunately. So this is how I look at it. When you purchase that product, were you charged the GST HST? If you were charged the GST HST, then it's a taxable item. So you would have to charge the sales tax. And if you weren't charged, then likely it's an exempt product. Like some groceries are like that, right? So when you go to the store, you buy it, you don't pay the sales tax, which means you wouldn't charge the customer either. So there's always some confusion with filing and payment deadlines. For the sole proprietors, April 30th is when you would file, you would make your payments. So April 30th is also the filing date. So let's say, I guess in this situation, perhaps you haven't started your Amazon business yet. And so you're just a regular personal tax individual. If that's the case, April 30th is when you would file your tax return. For those of you who are self-employed, you and your spouse, right? So this is where it gets a little tricky sometimes. People think, well, my husband isn't a business, he has a T4. But because you're married or you're common law and you're self-employed, he gets to file by June 15 as well. You have to keep in mind, though, if you file by June 15, but there's taxes owing, if you don't pay that by April 30th, you'll be charged interest. So there's a filing and there's a payment deadline. Obviously the government wants the money by April 30th. If your taxes aren't ready by then, you can do a couple of things. One, you can just make a lump sum payment, what you think you might owe. And sometimes your accountant can help you sort of determine an estimate of what you might owe. Or you wait till you actually file it, and you would incur some interest between May 1st and June 15. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable, depending on your situation, but I always encourage my sole prop clients to really start looking at their books middle of January, because their December, the sales summary would be ready. Everything would be ready for December by mid to late January. So if you start early, for sure you'll meet the April 30th deadline. So then you could. So the interest rate, I believe these days, is 10%. So CRA charges you 10% interest on overdue payments. For a corporation, again, they've got different filing and payment dates. So depending on when your fiscal year end is, your filing is due 6 months after the fiscal year, and your payment is due 3 months after the fiscal year. So if, let's say, you don't file within 3 months, there's no late filing penalty because you still have another 3 months to file. But your payment, they're going to charge you interest if you don't pay. So there's obviously it gets a little confusing. What I do with my corporate clients is I try and push them to aim for 3 months. So I'd like to file and pay within 3 months. That way you're positive. There's no point in getting all your paperwork done, getting your filing, your tax return prepared, and then saying, oh, okay, I don't owe money, so I'll just wait to file it in 3 more months. I mean, it's already done. File it and, kind of put it behind you and get on with your new year. So this is just a quote that I like because you know what, even, accountants, we have new tax rules coming out, and they come out fast. They're complicated. We have a couple right now that, the accountants are dealing with this tax season, some new stuff. And yeah, it could get really complicated. If at the very least you have an accountant that you can at least call, get some advice from, even if you're preparing your own tax return, it's handy to have that professional opinion. And then, you can decide whether you want to hire them to actually, prepare your corporate tax return, your personal tax return, or you can do it on your own. I mean, I'm not going to say it's very complicated for sole props, but I'm not going to say it's really easy. So, some people say, well, do you think I can file my own? That's a little difficult to determine because I personally don't know what your abilities are, what your understanding is of tax. I do have some clients they come to me and they're talking my language, so I know that they understand tax. So, if you have questions, I'm here. I try and help as much as I can. It is a busy season, I will say. Come March 1st, we are going to get pretty busy. So, my response time might be a little delayed, but within 2 or 3 business days is when I aim to reply to any requests. So I'm hoping that, I feel like I've talked a lot. I've talked quickly. So hopefully you kind of got an understanding or a better understanding of how you can prepare for your own tax return. And I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Carmela. Like that was so a good presentation. I actually learned something new today. Like as you know,
Oh,
I'm not good with my accounting as well. So learning from you is always like something that I value. Okay, there's several questions here that was asked. I'll
yeah,
read to you one by one,
sure.
and hopefully you can help them. So one of the questions I think it's about the travel, because you mentioned about the travel. So
Yeah.
what do you need to provide for them to verify through travel. So I guess receipts that they need to provide if they're gonna travel. What are the documents?
Yeah, so I mean, really, it would be, I guess, your flight ticket, your hotels, anything like that. Any meals on that trip are not deductible, unfortunately, but the travel itself and the accommodation would be. Of course,
Okay.
if you're taking someone to lunch or to dinner and it's business related, then it is deductible. But yeah,
So
for
but
travel, go ahead.
so the usual food, like for example, you're attending the conference and then you need to eat in between, lunch or dinner, whatever. That's not allowed.
No.
Only if you are going on a business meeting aside from
Yes,
attending.
that's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay. So how about the airfare? Like, will it cover everything?
Well, it depends on the nature of the travel, right? Are your family with you? If they are, then you certainly there's a personal portion there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're traveling to Germany, or let's say, I don't know, you want to get into, the European market. Um, if you're there for a week, but you're only like, let's say you're there for a conference and it's one day, and then the rest of the time you're just sightseeing, right? Then there's a personal portion, right? So you need to sort of take a look at that, maybe discuss it with your accountant and to see what percentage would be reasonable, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it has to do with what are your other travel expenses? Are you claiming anything else? Is the travel like $6,000, right? Which is a large amount. It's going to attract CRA's attention. So you want to make sure that you can support what you're claiming. So if you're claiming the full amount, you need to support and prove to the government that it was all business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know. So, John T is asking, what can we claim if we travel for training that is Amazon related? Oh, this is the same. Flights,
Okay.
hotel, taxi fare, course cost. So even the course, like for example, with me, I tried to go on a conference before and I paid for the conference fee, right? Like, so they need
Yes.
to pay for that. Does it include as an expense for the business as well?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
And okay, so what portion? They say what portion? So I guess Carmela already clarified that. It depends on if you are bringing someone with you, like, or you're alone there, and if it's
Hmm.
solely for business or not, right?
Yes.
Another question here, it says, I didn't download inventory report on the 31st of December. Now, how can I download it? Carmela is actually providing us a list of specific instructions on how to
Hmm.
download it in our from our seller central account. Will you provide that as well, Carmela? Like I didn't look at it very well, but is there an
Yeah.
instruction there on how to download it, even if it's
Yeah.
past
So
31st, right?
so keep in mind, there are the instructions to download your inventory report, but you can only backdate it 30 days, right?
30 days.
So
Yeah.
unfortunately now we're going to almost the end of January. So it's not going to be 100% accurate, but you need to use something, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
So I'm
I
going,
would, go
sorry.
ahead.
Can you see my screen? Because I just want to share
Oh,
with them what yes, I think I can see it in here. So just to give you what Carmela's talking about, just to show you guys. So this is the one that Carmela is sharing with us for you guys to see
that's right.
to know step by step. So this is the form that I'm gonna send you via email after, like, maybe give me maybe it's a weekend already, so maybe after, like, by Monday I will provide this for you guys. So the step by step on how to pull all the reports. So thank you for this, Carmela.
Hmm.
And also Carmela is giving us actually the list of most typical business expense. So just to let you know that don't worry about it. We'll provide it for you, including also the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you the slides just afterwards.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So, for like, I think I'm gonna download this also on YouTube. So for those of you who are watching via YouTube, I'm gonna create a link where you can register there. So in the description, so that I can send you over this file as well. Okay.
Okay.
Let me see what other question do they have. What bookkeeping software do you recommend?
Okay. So, there's so many out there. Doesn't mean one is better than the other, but I've used QuickBooks for like 25 years. So we use QuickBooks desktop and online for the majority, but we also use Wave. So Wave Accounting is a free software, and some of our clients opt to have, they're just starting out, so the fee that QuickBooks charges every month, they don't feel comfortable paying that. So Wave is the other option that is free.
Okay. I think I've heard about Wave before. The only thing that I'm afraid with that, like, I just want to let you know that was my reservation before I was choosing between QuickBooks and Wave.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that sometimes it will pull information that's not correct from Seller Central, because I think they have an option to pull it out. And they say that, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
need to repeat everything because it was like a mess. Is that still true?
So I'm not a big fan of connecting your seller account to any bookkeeping software. I'm a little old school, because I've had clients who use third-party apps, right? There's a Taxomate and A2X that some of my
Mm-hmm.
clients use. And I find that when the bookkeeper is going in to reconcile, to, make sure the books are nice and clean, A2X has duplicated entries. There's extra information that we don't really need. And so, you're paying for that fee when, it's fine. It may not be a lot per month, but it's not doing what you need it to do, which is cut down on bookkeeping time, right? We want to
Yeah.
minimize the time. And so, believe it or not, if a bookkeeper has to go in and clean up the books, it takes longer than if she was to do it right from scratch. It
So then
really, yeah, yeah.
it's more expensive, right? Like, so you're spending more instead of you saving, you're spending more money on bookkeeping, which is more
Yeah,
expensive per hour, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so another question here is that it says, how about expenses related to having a VA? So they're hired somebody, a virtual assistant from, for example, Philippines. They're giving them a salary. So, but maybe you can explain. I know the answer already, but you can explain it. Should we also file that?
Yes, so VA expenses are valid and you should claim them. The only way to pay, someone who's not in Canada is through, like, if they send you an invoice and you make the payment that way. We can't really pay them a salary, because a salary implies that you're taking off CPP, EI, and tax, and we can't do it if they're not here in Canada.
Okay, so basically with VA, it's more on like, it's not really contractor, right? But basically it's more like a fee for their services. That's
Yeah,
how we
yeah. I
consider
mean,
it.
you can, I suppose, you can, usually professional fees are legal and accounting. You can even just call them virtual assistant, or assistant fees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Administration fees, something like that.
Okay, so all you need for that is the invoice that they need to provide for you every month, stating
Yeah,
how much do you need to pay them, and that's it. That's all you
correct.
need
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. You can't just transfer the money, right? They have to provide an invoice.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are new with the VA, like you can teach them on how to do it. Canva do it. Like you can also do, I think with the
Yeah,
you can just search online, give them a template and say you just need to provide me with an invoice every month just for the
yes,
record, right?
yeah.
Okay, so it says here, an accountant I had a meeting with advised me I can pick up a year end as I am new in the business. Any time of the year you recommend?
So are you a corporation?
So let's just pretend that they're a corporation. So
Okay, so
what would you recommend?
okay, so I'll say with a sole proprietorship, you can't choose a year end. It has to be December. But with a corporation, so what I like to do is I'd like to choose anything from July 31st to December 31st. And usually it's the last day of the month. So if you choose from July to December, you have a little bit of flexibility with some tax planning. So if you're paying yourself, you can just sort of generally speaking, if you declare yourself a bonus, at July 31st of 2023, you don't have to pay tax on it till the 2024 year, right? So you're deferring some tax that way, and it can help depending on your personal tax situation. So yeah, that's my July 31st to December 31st. Um, as you know, December 31st is a very, very popular year end. So a lot of accountants are crazy busy from January to June. So if you are, you have to just keep that in mind. If you do choose a December 31st year end, your corporate tax stuff will, kind of be in that busy, busy season rather than in a season where, it's a little bit less chaotic and maybe your accountant has more time to sit with you.
Oh, that's interesting, right? So I
Yeah.
never, I just thought that, oh, December 31st is better. So it's like 12 months, it's easier, but I did not know that there's actually advantage if you use in the middle of the year
There
that
is. Yeah.
correct. Like you have more time to ask questions and your accountant can be more, available for you because they're
Yes.
not as busy. Wow,
You
that's
want to,
interesting.
I think you want to keep in mind as well, when is your busy season? So quarter 4 is crazy for Amazon sellers. So you don't want to choose something where your accountant is bugging you in October and November and December looking for bank statements and credit card statements. You don't want them bothering you at that time either, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of have to take a look at everything. Yeah.
So thank you for that. That's a really good advice. I think for those of you who's just starting, I think that's a good advice to follow. Okay, another question here. Um, when do you think is the best time to convert from sole proprietorship to a corporation?
Okay. I know. I get asked that all the time. The real answer is it depends. I hate saying that, but it does depend. So on a few things. So if you have a regular job and you're fine, you're living off of that income and you don't need the Amazon income, then it's a good time to incorporate, because if you need the money that Amazon is generating and you're using it to kind of supplement your lifestyle, then you're pulling money out of a corporation and you're going to get taxed on it personally. So it defeats the purpose of a corporation, where it's, you want to take advantage of the low tax rate and you want to keep as much money in the corporation as possible. So if you need it to live, um, don't incorporate. But if, let's say, you've got income that you're, personal income, so T4 income, or you got rental income, and you're okay to live off of that, incorporating is a good thing to be doing. I will say, when you're going from a sole prop to a corporation, that transition can be a taxable event. So you have to be careful. You need to speak with an accountant for sure. There might have to be another Section 85 rollover election, which just means you're filing paperwork with the government so that you're transferring your sole prop business to a corporation tax-free.
Okay.
That's a much more complicated situation, but just keep in mind if you are going from a sole prop to a corporation.
Does the accountant usually say tell the clients that? Because I think if you're not aware with that, like you don't know that should happen, right?
Right. So if it depends on when you go to the accountant. So let's say you decided this year you're going to transition to a corporation, but you don't go and look for an accountant until next year when it's time to file your tax return. It might be too late at that point.
Hmm.
Right. So, I mean, yes, the accountant should be the one saying, oh, you know what? You might have to file this election. But if you get to them late, it's kind of like, it's out of their hands now, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not something that everybody knows about. But, I do my best when, it's like these alarm bells go off in my head. As soon as someone says, oh, I went from a sole prop to a corporation, then that's kind of like when I step in and say, did you know? um, so usually there's still time to file that election. So, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, I would suggest if you're thinking about it, uh, speak to an accountant.
Okay, thank you. So every month, it says here, we pay for Kipa and other tools. Are these considered business expense? Do you need to claim back?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, so everything that even the courses, right? Like, so if
The
you pay for
courses,
my courses, you
yeah.
buy the mastermind that I was doing,
Mhm.
then all of those are business expense. All you need is
Correct.
the invoice that was sent to you, print that out, and that's considered as expense as well.
Right.
Hi Carmela, I'm totally new on this, just about to start. When should I open the GST HSA account, or do I wait until I achieve 30K in revenue? So what's your advice on this? Like, can they get it right away or wait for 30K in sales?
Yeah, I would get it right away because, there's a couple of reasons. One, any HST, GST that you pay out on all your expenses, and usually when you're a startup, when you start your business, there's a lot of expenses at that time. So if you want to get some of that HST back, register from the start. And also, if you wait until the 30,000, it's kind of like, okay, oh, now I'm at 30,000. So now I register, I get my number, but by the time you put it into your seller account, Amazon is already still collecting money on HST on that, on the sales. So there's like that overlapping period that can get a little tricky. So I would say if you're starting out, just do it from day one.
Yeah, and when you're buying groceries like inventory, you get charged 13%. That's another extra income
Right.
for you, right?
Yeah.
That's part of your ROI, right? So how do they know if it's I'm not sure what's this question. So the travel expense. So how do they know that it's for business or personal? Like when you're traveling.
Well, okay. So how does CRA know, or how do
Yes.
you know? How
I
does
think
CRA know?
yeah, how would they know that you went with I guess, for example, you went with your family or something like that, right?
Well, they certainly will ask a lot of questions. So if you're audited, they will ask a lot of questions. If they're not satisfied, they'll just disallow it. And then you need to prove, right? So, I would say like whatever documentation you can put together, right? So like, your plane ticket, your accommodation. So you can't show that your accommodations have three people in it, right? If there's three people, okay, who are they, right? Um, your conference, make sure you've got maybe the advertisement that the conference was held there at that time, how long the duration was. The best we can do for situations like that is keep as much documentation to show that it was a business expense. Um, and you know what? Be honest. If there was a personal element to that trip,
Mm-hmm.
then be reasonable and don't claim the whole thing, right? Because if the government sees that you are trying to take advantage of these expenses, then they're going to be a lot harder on you. But if you're being reasonable, if you said, well, I went to Florida for business, but I was only 3 days, the conference was 3 days long. The rest of the time I was with my family. Then your plane ticket, your part of the accommodation for the 3 days can be expensed, right? So if you're doing it, sort of, because tax is on the honor system, right? It's just whether or not you get audited, and we never know when that will be. You need to show that you're trying to be reasonable and working within the limits.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, some people are saying thank you to you for the resources. I think you're
You're
really
welcome.
you're one of the accountants that I love so much because you're very much willing to share a lot of things to us for free. So thank you for that, Carmela.
You're very welcome.
It says here, will there be a replay available? Yes, I'm going to send you once I uploaded it. I will send you actually a link for the replay. So wait for it a little bit because it's weekend here already where I am, and I want to spend it with my family because I work hard this whole week doing a lot of lives. So I need to rest a little bit. Okay, so but wait for it next week for sure. I will be sending you emails. So how about all the software we use? I think we already answered this. So Keepa, SellerAmp, all those can be considered as expense, including the courses
Correct.
that you bought from me. So
Yep.
how can we check in our Seller Central account that Amazon is GST, HST if we are not yet registered for that? I'm not sure if and how can we claim as well the shipping deduction of the UPS? Okay. I think I'm gonna answer for this. How can we check in Seller Central that Amazon is collecting, I think, GST?
Okay.
So when you don't input your GST number yet, for sure Amazon will be collecting it
Yeah.
On your behalf. Basically, they're gonna remit it to the government. But as soon as you input the GST HST number, they will start to collect it for you, and they're gonna give it to you in every payout. So if you print out your summary, you will actually see there like that how much did they are they giving back to you for GST, right,
Right.
Carmela?
That's correct.
And in terms of shipping as well as the shipping deductions of UPS, that's also in the report, right? So
That's right. Yeah. So when you're sending your shipments and you calculate how much UPS the charge is going to be, that's all part of your Amazon fees on your sales summary.
yes, so it's gonna be there once you pull out those reports. So make sure to follow the step-by-step guide that Carmela is providing you. Okay, so Carmela, how do we connect to your services that's providing you have openings to take more clients on? So actually, I wanna say about this at the end. So Carmela, you're still open to taking new clients,
Mhm.
right? So
We are. Yeah.
if you guys are interested with Carmela, she is kind enough to give everybody, like my students and whoever attended this seminar, a 10% discount to the first ever taxes that you're gonna file. So whatever charges she uh she will charge you there, she's gonna take out 10%. Just
Mhm.
tell Carmela, mention that you're from Cheryl. Tell them like Cheryl, I either I'm Cheryl's students or I saw her YouTube
Right.
video. Just tell Carmela my name and she's gonna give you 10%. That's her bonus for us tonight. Isn't it
Yes.
amazing? Carmela is really amazing. Okay, so are you everybody's asking, are you taking clients now? So that's good. So at least we in a way I can help Carmela also to get clients for this webinar. So hi Carmela, I am from Alberta, sole prop, registered already for GST HST account. If I will send the products and prep them here, tax is GST only. If I will use a prep center that is located in Ontario, can I claim for the GST and HST also?
Yes. So GST and HST is the same type of tax. It's just a different rate in every province. So whatever you are charged, whether you're charged the GST of 5% or the 13%, or even if you're in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, I think they've got 15% there. So that gets all accumulated and you claim it all back on the same HST return, GST HST return that you do. So yes, you get it all back.
Wow,
Just
that's
one thing I
good to
do
know.
want to say about accepting clients. So people may not know that although we're Canadian accountants, in order to work with clients in other provinces, we actually have to hold extra provincial licenses. So I've got I'm licensed to work with BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. So I don't really necessarily do anything with Eastern provinces, unfortunately. I didn't, apply for my licenses there because I find that the Amazon sellers come more from the West. And I don't handle Quebec taxes. Those are a
Okay.
whole other story. They're not, it has to be done in French. I'm not a French speaking accountant, so I had to, let some of my clients go that were from Quebec,
So
unfortunately.
So just in case, do you have any recommendation or you don't know anyone who's on that
For
area
Yeah,
provinces?
I don't know of any in the eastern provinces or for Quebec. Unfortunately I don't have contacts out there.
Yeah, so hopefully there's accountants out there who's in that province who can reach out to me also, who can give us,
Yeah.
can provide their help as well, right? So if we have social media presence to do business, so I guess this is more for those who are doing like private label and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Can we expense things like hair appointments, etc.? It is best to document via video and post on your social in case CRA wants to see proof. So basically, like, because I know now, like, I'm noticing there's so many people who's doing, like, for example, becoming
Yeah.
influencer to promote their products, right? So
Hmm.
would
Hmm.
that be considered as an expense? Because like for example with me, like I do a lot of lives and I buy so many makeups now. Like before I never really wear makeup and now I need to color my hair and stuff like that. Is
Yes.
that considered as expense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is kind of how CRA will look at that. Let's say today is your shoot, right? So you want to do
Mm-hmm.
your live or your photo shoot, and you get your hair done. Well, usually that's like, I know the color lasts a bit, but let's say, you get it styled, cut, whatever. That I would say, sure, expense that. But if you bought a whole new outfit for the shoot, if you're going to keep that outfit in your closet and wear it any other day personally, then that's not a deduction. The
So that's not
government
a
will
dash.
see that there's a personal element to that, right? So it's not like
Mm-hmm.
it's a uniform with your badge on for your company, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you can really only, like, it's for business. You're not going to use it
Mm-hmm.
to go out for dinner, right? But
Yeah.
the outfit you bought for the shoot could be used another time. So unfortunately, they don't give a lot of leeway. I'm not saying that you shouldn't expense things,
Mm-hmm.
but really we need to, again, that you have to discuss with your accountant to see, like, is it reasonable? Are you willing to take the risk? If it's audited and they disallow it, are you good with that? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I also need to explore because with me, I've been spending so much now. Because, like,
Yeah.
for example, especially in social media, they would bash you for everything, right? So,
Oh
so
my gosh,
most
it's
if
horrible.
yeah, so most influencer would try to look at like the best that they can be also when
Yeah.
doing like even lives and stuff like that, just to avoid those kind of like rude comments and stuff. So I guess that's something that um we need to look at more because of
Yes.
course Amazon is not like that, but I think for people who's really doing private label, there for sure
Yeah.
there's tons who's also doing their own marketing just to do that.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that this is a really good questions that was asked, right? So okay. If a person has a full-time job and gets a T4 and also doing Amazon business as a side hustle, the total amount of income to both will be combined on tax submission.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're making 50,000 on a T4 and you have a profit of 30,000 with Amazon, you have to pay tax on 80,000. Yeah.
Okay, so that's combined. But then the with the expenses, it can be deducted from all the income.
Oh, yes. So when you're adding your income, so it's not your sales, right? It's your net. So that's your sales less your expenses. Right. So
Okay.
if your sales less the expenses is 30,000, then that's what you add.
Okay, thank you so much. So
Right.
as a non-seller who is just gathering information, this has been very rich. Thank you so much. You're welcome,
You're welcome.
Martine. I'm glad that you attended, even if you're not a seller yet. It's just for you guys to get an idea on how it works, right? So
Mhm.
I think a lot of our participants tonight are actually sellers, but there's few who's just maybe wondering like how
Thinking
Amazon
about it.
selling
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea to get information, also to know that the business is legit and that
Yep.
it can really give you good income as well, right? So how about the telephone bills? Especially for me, I am paying my daughter phone number. Thanks, Miss Carmela.
So with the telephone bills, those are difficult to expense, right? 100%. Because like you mentioned, you could have your family's cell phones on there as well. And also there's detailed, the government can say, let me see your phone bills, right? And they'll look at it and see that all the calls are personal, right? So you can't really expense any part of your telephone in that case. But if you are using it for some business, then every month, if you've got you have to prorate it basically. So it's a lot more work, but it is the right thing to do, right? So you can only expense the business portion.
Okay, so for me, for example, with me, I'm traveling overseas. I actually have two cell phone numbers because it's
Okay.
for OTP. Right now, I put it as a lowest as possible, but I need to keep both for the OTP. Like that's the most important thing with the banking, right? Like they always
Mm-hmm.
want, and different banks, they want, for example, I have two accounts because I have two
Yep.
businesses. So there's two numbers. And that could be considered as 100% because I'm not really using it. It's more really for business. I just
Yeah,
turn it on. So that's gonna be 100%, right?
that's right. Yep.
Okay. So basically at the end, like I guess general rule is that if you're really using it for business, then it's gonna be an expense. But if there's combination of other personal expenses,
Yes.
unfortunately you can't. So you need to make
Right.
sure that you follow the rules because I think it's harder when you get audited because then there's more expense to that, right?
Well, there's more expense, but then they don't just ask about your telephone, they'll look at everything else too, right? So we just want to make sure that, we're being reasonable, we're getting what we're entitled to. I mean, I'm a firm believer that if you're entitled to the expense, claim it, right? Because we need to lower
Yeah,
our taxes somehow.
yeah.
But, you have to discuss it with your accountant or however you feel, as long as there's a method as to how you calculated the business portion, you should
Mm-hmm.
be okay.
Yeah. So I have a question then for you. So for example, a client of yours, they really are not sure and they just give you all the receipts because they're
Mhm.
not sure if like should I deduct this or not. So do you take it into consideration? Like for example, you get the receipt, but actually it's not allowed. Do you tell them or like do you just not include it when you're doing the taxes?
Yeah, so what we usually do, because we know there's a personal portion to, your telephone, your vehicle, even if you provide us with the information, so the amounts, I always confirm, was this 100% for business? If you say yes, then I take your word for it. I'm not an auditor, right? So if I firmly believe that between the client and the accountant, there has to be 100% honesty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you tell me that, yes, that was all business, then that's what I use. But if you
Yeah.
say to me, oh, well, I do use it a little bit for this or a little bit for that, then we can have a discussion to figure out what's the reasonable amount to deduct. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So there's only a few more questions. So thank
Yeah.
you, Carmela. I'll just finish this and then we're gonna be done. I know we're
Right. Yeah.
extending a little bit, but thank you for that. So it says here, thanks, Cheryl and Carmela. It was very useful webinar for Amazon newcomer. So everybody's saying thank you. And last two questions. If we sell in Canada and the States as a sole prop for bookkeeping, should we just convert our USA sales to Canadian and do our P&L in one currency? Any issues with dynamic currency exchange rate that changes throughout the year?
Yeah, so whenever you're reporting, so your P&L, your tax return, all has to be converted to Canadian dollars. You can't report in a different currency. So yeah, so what you would do is ideally, when the transaction happens, you use the foreign currency on that day, right? But if you go all the way through the year and you haven't converted anything, so at the end of the year, I would look at the average currency, the exchange for the year, and use that for your balances.
Okay. Thank you for that. So last two questions. So this is the last two questions. Can we get the percentage of space we use for Amazon business and file the rent or mortgage as an expense? I guess that's for the house.
Yes, so the rent, absolutely. For the mortgage, it's not your mortgage payment, it's your interest only. So look at your mortgage statement at the end of the year. It'll show you the total interest that you paid for 2023, and then you apply your percentage just to the interest portion.
Okay, perfect. And how to calculate the mileage? I keep my receipt for those store that I source.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. So one, you can basically keep track of only the mileage. So, you make a note that you've gone to Walmart or you've gone to Staples for shipping supplies. So let's say at the end of the year, you've got 500 kilometers that you drove for business. Then what you do is instead of expensing your gas, your repairs, your insurance, you just take the 500 and you multiply it by the government's car allowance rate. Every year it changes, it goes up a little bit. You can easily Google that on the CRA website, what the allowable, I think it's like 63 cents per kilometer right now. So you could do it that way, or you have to write down on January 1st, you have to write down what your odometer reading is. You have to keep track of all your business expenses. And then on December 31st, you have to do your ending odometer reading and then do the calculation to get the percentage. And once you get the percentage, you apply it to your fuel, to your insurance, and etc. Yeah. So it's only two ways, but in both cases, you need a mileage log.
Okay, perfect. And actually, if you have QuickBooks, they can also track it for
right.
you, right? I think there's something called Miles IQ. I remember that,
Mile
but I don't
IQ, yes.
Mile IQ, right? So those are like a software you can use to automatically track your vehicle. Like I think you just need to press the button, turn it on, whatever you're
Yeah.
moving, and then it will help you to get all those mileage for you. So that's it. So thank you so much,
You're
Carmela, for
welcome.
once again. I think I already have like 3 videos of you in my YouTube, but I know that our viewers will never get tired watching you because it's always packed with information. So thank you so much
You're very
for
welcome.
today. And for those of you who are watching, thank you so much. For those of you who doesn't know me, my name is Cheryl. I didn't introduce myself earlier. And I'm an Amazon coach for Canada. So I provide a lot of information, free information as well, so that at least I can help people to run their business. Okay, so thank you
Great.
so much and have a great
You're welcome.
Friday.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks everyone.
Carmela.